Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me this morning for your webinar on digital marketing, fixing the basics. So my name's Kristy Bailey. I am a presenter and advisor for Business Station as part of the ASBAS program. I'll be going through the webinar with you today. Keep in mind, I also have a marketing business, so everything that we're going through today will be based on my real life experience and things that I sort of implement on a daily basis. So we'd really like the webinar to be as interactive as possible, and I'd really encourage you to pop in questions using the Q&A functionality or the chat functionality, and stop me at any time if you've got anything that you want to expand on. We do have a lot to get through today, so hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end of the session as well. But keep in mind, if there's any areas of what we go through today that you don't quite understand, or you might not be at that level from your digital marketing, where you're at with your digital marketing, or from that perspective, you can always look to book a one-on-one session with any of our digital advisors at a later date as well. So we'll start now. I'll just quickly run through what we're actually going to go over today. Now, what we're going to get into, we're going to speak about the key components of online marketing and what are the must-dos for each of those main areas. So we'll look at must-dos for your website. We'll look at some essential online business listings. We'll have a chat about SEO and SEM, as well as social media, and then touch on email marketing as well. So sort of the core digital marketing components. Now, just before we get into some of those things, just having a look at what are the online marketing benefits. So as I'm sure you know, a lot of consumers use the internet to search and to find a number of different types of businesses. Now, they actively seek out information. Now, that information could be your contact details or your location, so something as simple as that. It could be what products and services you have available to determine whether or not they're actually going to get to you or contact your business further. But they might also be looking to purchase products and services, and they'll be doing that at a time that suits them. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, essentially. So the benefits for you are that you can accurately reach your target market at any time, so 24/7. The results for the work that you put in for online marketing are very measurable, and they're immediately available. So it's not like traditional marketing where you have to wait a couple of weeks, place an ad, see if the phone rings type thing. You can really track anything and everything that goes on with your advertising, with your marketing, but also in and around your website. It's extremely cost effective. So digital marketing is accessible to any size business with any size budget. A lot of what we go through, almost everything that we go through today, can be done in-house, depending on your time, resources, and perhaps your own capabilities. But in saying that, like I said, you've joined this amazing program where you've got access to one-on-one advisory services with digital advisors as well. So if there's something you're not sure about, just keep in mind that you can access that service and you can find out more, so that you are able to then have a look at doing some of this stuff in-house. Now, the huge benefit for online marketing is that you really get to build direct relationships with your customers. And so that doesn't stop at the point of purchase. When you look at social media, email marketing, you can continue that relationship well into the future. Now, at the core of your online marketing is your website. You do have to keep in mind, whilst this is the main component of your online marketing, because it really is at the core, it's only part of the strategy. Potential customers have to be able to find that website. You also need to actively engage with current and future customers online as well. So we'll talk more about both of those components. But first, for your website itself, this is a place where customers can find out about your products. They'll make purchases, even if you're a physical, like a bricks and mortar premises, and you might be closed. Or if you don't have a physical address, people can still come to your website and find information. So that's what I mentioned about that 24/7. I would think of your website as your number one salesperson that's working all day and all night, 365 days a year for your business. Thinking about it in that sense, ask yourself, is your website doing your business justice? Is it selling your product and service as it should? Have you invested any time or money into that website? Considering people might not even get to your business if what they see online doesn't appeal to them. So there are some key web design elements that you'll need to consider. The first thing that you need to consider, and this is more from a strategic sort of perspective, what is the purpose of the website? Is it for people to purchase things? Is it for people to find your location, or something else? You'll need to cater to the needs of that user. So once you know what your website is, and obviously you know what your product or service is, you have to make sure that it does what the user is coming to your website to do. In terms of communication, people have to be able to get information quickly and easily. So think about some of the typical questions that you get asked within your business, like your FAQs essentially. Does your website address and answer all of those questions? Images are hugely important. I would recommend professional images. If possible, they have to accurately depict your business though. They have to position your brand correctly. So make sure that your pictures or any images used on the website are true and correct to your product, and you're not overselling or underselling what your business is. But professional photography will always help. And again, that's an investment that you might have to make at some stage, or if you feel that you can get professional enough shots, then that's absolutely fine. In terms of images, another thing to consider is, and I'll go through this quite a bit today with regards to target market, but do your images talk to your target market? Are the people in your images or in the images on your website representative of your target market? So keep that in mind. Fonts have to be easy to read. Their font size has to be large enough. In terms of color schemes, you don't want, a red font on a yellow background or vice versa. So you have to make sure that they're nice and clear. And that sort of ties into colors as well. Colors have to suit your target market, first of all. They have to be complementary to each other and to the rest of your website, and they have to be on brand as well. So suiting your actual brand. Navigation is really important. How easy is it to take action and move around? You should be able to find the information you need in 3 clicks or less, is what experts say. So think about that. You don't want to send people into a bit of a rabbit warren in terms of getting in and around your website. You want boom, boom, boom. They should be able to take action. The F pattern from a navigation perspective is what is recommended, and from a layout perspective, I should say, of your website. So the F pattern is how we read. We read left to right and we read top to bottom. So making sure that the information on your website is laid out in that way is the most highly recommended and the most suitable to the majority of people. Your load time is hugely important. Now, this is really important for the user because we are less patient than ever before. So a slow load time can frustrate users. It is important for SEO as well. So how well Google's going to rank your website will come down to the load times, amongst other factors. So we'll talk about that more, but keep in mind, just from the user's perspective, if nothing else, those load times are really important. Now, images can impact load times, so large images that take a long time to load up. So those kind of things can impact. Being mobile friendly is absolutely crucial, or fully responsive. So fully responsive is like the image that you see on your screen. And that means that your website's going to look good and it's going to adapt itself to the device that it appears on. So it could be desktop, which is more of a landscape orientation. It could be tablet or mobile, which is generally more of a portrait orientation. So keep that in mind. Now, we touched on communication, getting info quickly and easily, but content is something that we'll expand on as well, because your content is really important so that customers can get that information, they can get enough, and that the info flows. So we'll expand on that too. Now, everything that you do on your website should be speaking to and aimed at your target market. So whether it is images, fonts, colors, your navigation, the technology or the functionality of your site, it's all about who you're aiming your marketing towards. So really, before you go and do anything on your website, you have to have clearly defined your target market. Who is the core audience that you are aiming your product or service towards? So that's just a touch on website design. Now, having a great website is one thing, but you have to be able to be found. So we'll talk about SEO. But before we do, in the case that you do want to outsource your web design, You may need to look at using a web developer, obviously, if there's things that you can't do yourself. Now, just a couple of recommendations for those that would be interested in using a web developer. Costs can really vary depending on functionality, the size and scope of your website. So all developers, or the majority of developers, will ask some key information from you, and then they'll provide a scope of works and a quote. In terms of choosing a web developer, I would highly recommend that you see their past projects and have a look at what kind of things they've done. Have they designed websites for businesses similar to yours, or functionality that's similar to what you require? Clearly understand their level of expertise. If you have some very technical things or requirements for your website, you have to know that that developer is able to actually carry out that work. The process has to be transparent. Now, they will have to tell you timeframes, costs, exactly what those costs include, which is a point a couple down. In terms of how many pages the price includes, how many revisions. So they might come to you and you might not be satisfied. So how many times can you go back and forth and revise that web design prior to it going live, and obviously incorporated in the price? I would recommend that you're able to engage with them face-to-face on some level. We're talking face-to-face at the moment. So if it's over Zoom, that's absolutely fine. If you can pick up the phone and have a chat to them, a lot of communication breakdown happens over email, and timeframes are sort of drawn out and deadlines get missed because of emails going back and forth, particularly if you're working in different time zones or anything like that. So if you can have some kind of personal engagement with them, I think from a communications perspective, it can clear up a lot of things. Now, I would also recommend, if you're choosing a developer, that they are a developer that builds in a CMS, which is a content management system. There are a few. WordPress is very popular, but there are certainly others. So just make sure that they are building in a content management system. The huge benefits for that are that the content management system is where all of your content is held. You can easily access it and update various things on your website. Experts say that your website should be as easily able to be updated as your social media, for example. So something changes in your business, immediately that needs to be changed on your website. So if it's built in a content management system, you'll get a login, you'll be able to update that information. The more things that you can update on your website, the better it is for you. Because that means that you've got more flexibility if you're adding pages, changing pages, introducing new products or services. You're not relying on going back and forth to a developer constantly. So that's another benefit of being built in a content management system. Okay, quality content I touched on before, but content is really important for two reasons. One is for SEO. And SEO is search engine optimization. Like I said, we'll get into that. But the other thing is for conversation, or conversation in terms of information, talking to your target audience. You have to make sure that you are able to communicate with them, and it is the information that they're actually chasing. The information needs to be original. It should be succinct and to the point. You should be using headlines so that the content is broken down and it's easily visible by your customers. There's also an SEO element to that as well. Bullet points, again, can break up content as well. The other thing is, what I see on websites a lot of the time is that there's typos and unnecessary errors. So always proofread your content, and even, go to your website and have a look now and just see, is it relevant, is the first thing, but are there any typos or any mistakes in there, which can really impact, obviously, the user's perception of your business from a professionalism perspective, but then also your SEO. If you're spelling words wrong, then search engines won't be able to find what you're looking for. Now, if you factor in all of these points, if you're talking to your audience, if it's original content, it's succinct and to the point, you're using headlines, bullet points, all the words are accurate, it will lead to much greater conversion. And conversion means people taking action and basically doing what you want them to do on your website. That could be hitting a call, a phone number so that they're calling you. It could be filling in a contact form, or it could be actually transacting on your site. So your conversion, what you've deemed that is a conversion. Okay, now looking at functionality and accessibility. Now, consistency with your headings is really important. Now, headings, I've touched on, headings are really important for consumers and how we look at things. So basically, the bigger the heading, the more important we'll think it is. So every page may have a heading. Those headings should be consistent. So every page has an H1 size, which is a particular size of heading. Then the next sub-paragraph might have a H2, and that's consistent across all pages. So making sure that there is that uniform sort of approach across all pages of your website. Again, there's SEO factors there too. All of your internal pages within your website should be accessible in 3 clicks or less. And I touched on that earlier as well. So just having a think about how people behave on your website. Now, a really good way to test some of these things is to get family or friends or people that you know to go and perform a task online. So maybe say to them, purchase something off me, or find my contact details, or whatever the task is, what people normally do on your website, and watch them do it. You'll see as they go through that there could be some roadblocks there, and you can address those by watching them. Your home link is really important. You don't necessarily need a home button on your website. People do know that your logo represents home. So that is a pretty much a bit of an unspoken rule. So check your website now. Make sure if people click your home button, it actually takes them to the home page of your site, because that is what the consumer expects. And we expect that through behavior. It's essentially what the large majority of websites allow us to do. So when we go on a site, we think that that is how we're going to get home. And that's really important to get people back to where they started at any point within their experience on your site. Traditional navigation, I think, is really important. Now, there's all kinds of navigation that you can use. I've seen, you know, your traditional is across the top. I've seen navigation down the right-hand side. You see all kinds of creative things, but the recommendation is definitely that traditional navigation works best, depending on the nature of your business or service, or your product or service, I should say. Now, traditional navigation, we say it works best just purely because, again, it's behavioral. People get used to behaving in a certain way. So if you go and throw something completely different at them, they might find it difficult to actually take action on your website. In terms of taking action, your call to actions are really important. Now, this could be buy now, book now, it could be contact us, it could be absolutely anything, but that call to action should be consistent across your website. So if what you want people to do is buy now, then they should be able to do that from any page on your site. Let's say we've started an information search on a website. We get to the product page and we're not quite ready to actually make the purchase at that point. So we go to the FAQ page, for example, or the About Us page. We don't want to have to backtrace or backtrack and go backwards to be able to find that point where we wanted to transact. It should be easily available for us on any and every page. Consistent navigation on all pages is really important. So if you've got a menu bar that exists on your home page, make sure that that is templated, so to speak, across all of your pages, so that, again, if I'm deep into your site on a particular page and I want to go back to somewhere that I had been before through your menu, I can easily do that. And this is all for usability. The interesting thing about everything we're talking about is the easier and the better you make it for the user, the more, the better you're going to do from an SEO perspective as well. So I'll explain that more when we get to that point. Okay, technology is the last point there from a design perspective. Obviously, I've touched on being fully responsive. Which is your website adapting its shape and functionality based on the device that your consumer is viewing it on, whether that's desktop and it's more landscape, and like I said, a laptop will be smaller again, a tablet and phones then reduce in size. Now, experts are saying to build your websites for mobile first, and then worry about what it looks like on desktop later. So the research is all there and the stats are there that it is really a mobile world. So people are looking at websites, or the majority of your consumers are generally looking at your websites on mobile. So it's really important that that experience is fantastic for them. And then obviously what that looks like on desktop is also important, but that mobile experience is hugely important. As I mentioned, being built with a content management system will allow you to stay up to date. So as there's new updates that go on across all different browsers and platforms and devices, your content management system has to stay up to date with those. And that's a huge benefit of using a content management system, is that there will be regular updates to that technology. Online bookability or purchasability is really important. Again, if people want to transact with you online, you should be allowing them to. So whether it's booking a product or service, whether it's purchasing something or making some kind of committing to something with you, you should be looking. This will vary depending on your business or your product and service. But if you've got something that people can book or buy, you should be allowing them to do that online. Reliable hosting is really important. I prefer local hosting, as in within Western Australia or Australia, depending on where you are. And that's really because, you know, if there's any issues and your website is down, you can pick up the phone and call someone and find out what's going on. You can get hosting extremely cheap overseas, but the reliability may be a concern, whereas, yeah, you might pay slightly more, but that reliability is really important. The last thing you want is people trying to go to your website and not being able to because of your hosting. All right, so we've used the term SEO a couple of times, well, many times, but for those that don't know what it is, SEO is search engine optimization. So in very simple terms, it's the process of improving your website to increase its visibility for relevant searches. Now, good SEO is really a combination of hundreds of different tactical efforts. It changes and evolves, so that tactics that could have resulted in top rankings for you just a few years ago might not be significant now. So it's important that you continually look at your SEO and continually focused on SEO. It does take time. We would say to allow a couple of weeks to a month before you start to see any results. And that's because Google only crawls websites on a sort of a cycle. So it is a constantly changing landscape. You have to keep on top of the latest algorithms and then modify your SEO accordingly. Now, SEO incorporates two different things. One is on-page SEO and the other is off-page SEO. So on-page SEO is everything that happens on your website, and off-page SEO is everything that happens away from your website that directs people back to your website. Before I explain to you how web bots work or how this SEO process works, just keep in mind that for SEO to be effective, keyword research is the absolute key thing. So you need to do keyword research before you do any SEO or make any changes to your website. So you have to know what people are actually searching to get to your site. You can do this through a number of different tools: Ubersuggest, Google Keyword Planner tool. You can type in what words you think people might be searching, and then it will tell you what the volumes are for those specific terms. The next step is to work out if those terms suit your business. Then you have to improve rankings for those search terms. Now, we've just had a question pop in terms of what is a reasonable budget per month for SEO for a small coaching business. SEO, there are two sides of it. There's on-page SEO and off-page SEO. So it really depends where your websites are at the moment. With on-page SEO, that will involve keyword research and then adapting everything on your website so it targets those keywords. So I find that on-page SEO can be almost a once-off. So you get someone to go over your SEO, do the keyword research, go over your website and make sure that everything is perfect. What actually takes time and costs more and then is ongoing from a monthly perspective is off-page SEO. So off-page SEO is all of those things that link people back to your site, and that is constant. So you might be looking at writing articles that appear on blog posts that then link back to your website. You could be looking at getting listings on a range of different business and industry sites. So it'll really come down to the hours that the SEO person is putting in to do those tasks. If you've got a brand new website, you would probably have to spend quite a bit initially to get everything in place. And then you could probably reduce it down so that it's less ongoing once you've got to a good place. So I've totally got around your question, but to answer it, I guess, a bit more bluntly, it really depends on where you're at with your website in terms of where it's currently ranking. So doing the keyword research, knowing exactly what the terms are that people are searching, assessing where you rank in relation to those keywords. So let's say, you know, you're a small coaching business, your keywords are Perth business coaching, for example. In that sense, you would look at your website and go, all right, well, you're actually ranking #1 for this term, this term, this term, and this term. There's probably not that much that you need to do ongoing. Whereas if you're ranking, you know, 30 or 50 or something like that, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get you onto page 1. So it's quite specific. Just as a bit of a benchmark though, an SEO company that I work with for Offpage SEO, or a bit of both, but they mostly focus on Offpage SEO, is around $700, $800 a month. And that is obviously dependent on the business and where you're at. So yeah, really, really depends. Okay, now before we go into SEO, we'll look at web bots. So web bots basically they crawl your website, and I said on a cycle, and they understand what your website and your business is about with the information that they find when they're crawling. They then index all of your pages in their database. They list your website's pages in relation to how well you rank. So hopefully it's on the first page of results, depending on your keyword and your SEO efforts. And it results in increased targeted visitation to your website if you do get on that first page. So when we talk about SEO and we talk about Google web bots, for example, there's obviously Yahoo, Bing, and a range of other search engines. We kind of refer to Google because that's the most common, but that's what they're doing. They're crawling everything on your site. So when we start talking about SEO efforts, we're looking at everything that happens on your site. Like I said, it's a combination of hundreds of different factors. Now, I'm going to go through some of those. First of all, from an on-page SEO perspective, this is everything that happens on your website that affects the ranking. So some of the key things that a web bot is looking for here would be readable URLs, which I'll show you an example of, internal links, which are links from your website, a particular page on your website to other pages on your website. 301 redirects, which is if you've got a page that's no longer live, that you've directed it to another page. Page load times I've mentioned, title tags and meta descriptions, I'll show you what they are, and then alt tags and heading tags. So that's kind of the main components of on-page SEO. So I'll go through those now. So URLs, you can see the example on here, businessstation.com.au/training. That is relevant to what the page might be about, whereas sometimes a content management system will give you a coded sort of page like the one that you see underneath, which is page ID 53. So those URLs should be readable and relevant to the keywords that you're targeting based on your keyword research, and they should make sense. So that's a very simple one. If you are changing any pages, let's say you did have a page on your site like that second one, you would have to do a 301 redirect. So we'll talk about that now. So you'd have to tell Google essentially that this page that used to be page_ID = 53 now sits at /training. So you have to do that redirect so that people don't go to old pages. Internal links. Now, I've got an example here where you can see this is the Seagull Hotel, Mandurah. You can see in that second paragraph, they talk about 1 and 2 bedroom guest rooms, suites, and self-contained apartments. Now, you can see that self-contained apartments is highlighted. If you were to be live on that site and hover over that, or click it, it would send you straight to the self-contained apartment page. That's an internal link. So anywhere that you can link or mention, or anywhere that you mention other pages on your website, you should be linking through to. That's really important from a user perspective. So if you're telling me you've got self-contained apartments, I don't want to then have to go up to the menu, look at accommodation, find the self-contained apartment page, and then click on it and go through there. If you're telling me about it, send me to it. It's nice and easy. So think about that and have a bit of a look at your website and go through and just see see what internal link possibilities you've got. This is something that you can very, very easily do yourself, and it does have a big impact. One thing you'll notice here, anything that is good for the consumer is also good for SEO. So basically Google, when they're looking at all these factors, they want to direct people to websites that offer the consumer a great experience. So whether that's load time, whether it's internal links to make searching on that site easy, whether it's redirections so you don't go to dead pages and that kind of thing, anything that's good for the consumer, Google's going to rank pretty well. So keep that in mind as well. It really does, everything you do for SEO appeals to both. On the right hand side of the page there, you see the 301 redirects. That's, as I mentioned, if you're changing any of your URLs, you're basically going to put a redirection in and say this URL, or the page that used to sit at this URL now sits at the new URL. So if anyone has a link, perhaps you sent an email out 4 years ago and they've got a link and somehow they click it again, they're not going to a page that's inactive. All right, page title tags. So each of the pages on your website should have its own unique title tag. Now, this title tag should include the main keywords for that page. So it's not the headline that's displayed on the page as such. This is only visible in code view. So it is specifically a title tag for the search results. So you can see here the example I've got in the red box. This would be if I search ASBAS Perth, that is what comes up. Google and other search engines will use this information that we've specified to display as the main title in the search results. Okay, so the optimal length of a title tag is only 60 characters. And now that's long enough, as you can see here, to display a good title without it getting cut off. So don't use any stop words like the or is and. They don't have any value whatsoever. The preferred format is to use your primary keywords first. So aside from being a really critical factor for Google, good page title tags can really influence your users. And if they're appealing, they're more likely to be clicked. So it has to make sense, because that is your ultimate goal. It's getting people to click through to your website. Then you've got meta descriptions. So meta descriptions aren't visible in any part of your website. So except if you check the actual HTML code. So again, that's where it's located. It's a little description that's found under your title in search results. So you can see again in the red square there. It doesn't actually affect your ranking in search engines, but if it's well written, again, it could encourage people to click through to your website. It's like a mini ad for your business and it's free. So if you don't enter a meta description for each and every one of your pages individually, Google will do it for you. And the way Google does it is they take a small sample from the text on your site. So sometimes that could be cut off. Sometimes it's not really relevant to your keywords. So it's really much more beneficial that you take control of this, because like I said, it is like a mini ad and it's completely free. Now this one is only 160 characters. And if you only use 160, you'll make sure it doesn't get cut off. Definitely don't use the same meta description on every page of your website. The description for each page should be unique to what that page is about. So if you've got an About Us page and then you've got product number 1, that'll have, some words that are relevant to that. Product number 2 might have something else. Contact us. So each of these pages should have a unique description. Okay, so the last 2 elements in terms of on-page SEO are alt tags and heading tags. So alt tags that you see on the left-hand side, these are used for images. So they're HTML tags that you can use to describe what the image is. Because search engines can't see an image as such, they look for a description. And if they can't read a description as in words, they'll have no idea what the image is or if it's even relevant. So if those Google bots can find your image because it's correctly labeled, it obviously adds, counts towards your ranking and in terms of, the keywords. And then your images could also appear in a Google Images search. It's a really good idea to include local keywords or the title of the page with the keywords that you're trying to rank for in your alt tags. Then you've got heading tags. So when we spoke about web content, we spoke about heading tags. Heading tags are really important for SEO because they tell Google what the content on your website is or what how important it is, but they also tell the reader the same thing. So you might remember I said the bigger the label, so an H1, that might be what the entire page is about. So you might have H1 size headings across the top of all of your web pages. Then subsections, so H2, H3, H4, and the smaller the relevance of the heading, the smaller the size, the smaller the relevance. So that could be what the individual sections are about. So if you think about a user, they might glance over your website or over a page, and headings are really important to draw their eyes to specific areas or specific topics. And then on the other side of it, search engines use those heading tags as indicators of context, I should say. So what's on the page and how does it relate to what the user is searching for? Because those heading tags carry different weights, like I said, H1 has to be the most important and what the entire page is about. And then the smaller the heading, what the various sections are about. So the least important information. So it's very, very straightforward. So that's on-page SEO. And like I said, I wouldn't say that you do anything once because algorithms change, but you need to do a once over on your website to make sure that everything on page is done properly, it's relevant to your keywords. And prior to doing that, you obviously have to do that keyword research. As algorithm changes and significant changes happen, you might have to relook at that, but it's not something you'd have to be doing work on vigorously every month as such. Off page, on the other hand, being actions that are taken outside of your website to impact your rankings within search engines, should make up the majority of your SEO and should be continually done to help build the credibility of your website. So you want your website to rank above others that have similar messages. So to be able to do that, you really have to keep and continually build your website's authority. So a couple of ways you can do that. First of all, link building. Link building is the process of getting external pages to link to a page on your website. So building links can be complicated. It can be time consuming. Not all links are as important, or they're not all equal. So, and a link from a more authoritative website will make a greater impact on your search engine results, or your search engine optimization, than a link from a newly built or a low quality website. So the best way to explain that is to think about, if you were seeking some legal advice for your business, who would you trust more? 2 qualified lawyers or 10 strangers that were just, average people, not lawyers? The chances are you're going to trust the advice of the lawyers over random strangers, because even though you're not getting as many opinions, you know that they're educated, which means their advice carries more weight. So the same applies to links and how search engines view them. Google bots will count all the links coming into your website, but they're not all equal. They'll give more weight to any quality links, and then they'll rank your website accordingly. So if your website had 100 poor quality links and your competitor had 15 very high quality links, the chances are that your competitor will rank higher than you for the exact same search terms. Also keep in mind, Google has become very good at spotting a scam when it comes to link building. Now, you used to be able to do all kinds of dodgy things like buy bulk links and lead them all to your website and pay a small amount for them, but you can't do that anymore. Google will actually penalize you for any dodgy business like that. So keep in mind, a good quality link should come from a trusted and reputable site, or a site that's related to your type of business. It should be difficult to come by and require some kind of human intervention to implement. It should be on a page that has content that's related to the content it's being linked to. So not all links should just go to your homepage. They should go to the relevant pages. It should add value to the reader. So let's say I'm on a blog site, I'm reading all about coffee, and then there's a link to your website, which is coffee beans, for example. That adds value to the reader because it makes it nice and easy for me to get to what the article is talking about. And so the next point is that they should really be likely to be clicked by the reader as well. Now, I've just had a question with regards to links. Would it include a link to your site, a link to your site from your LinkedIn profile or your Facebook post you wrote? Absolutely. Those links sort of sit somewhere else, and that's in the next point that you see on the screen, which is within social media. So just as important, what we're talking about here is really authoritative websites linking back to your website, and that's sort of link building. But non-link building type stuff in terms of social media and brand mentions are really important as well. So those kind of links, the more, and when we talk about social media, social sends signals. So the more activity that you've got going on in social media in terms of links back to your website, comments, shares, likes, that kind of thing, the more impact that has on your SEO as well. So yes, absolutely. If you've got any of your profiles should have links to your websites, anytime that you can, if you're linking back to your website, let's say through a Facebook post, that's really important. It's good for the consumer. So let's say you're talking about something, you know, business XYZ, we offer this and this and this, and you might have a blog post about it on your website. Obviously that blog post that sits on your website is great for SEO because it's more content, more words, obviously just content for the web bots to crawl, but then you post a link to it on your Facebook page, you'll get engagement there, you'll get clicks from that post back to your website. So yes, absolutely all part of your off-page SEO strategy. So in terms of commonly practiced off-page SEO, almost any activity that occurs outside of your own website and helps to improve your search ranking could be thought of as off-page SEO. And that includes link building, like I've said, which is actively looking for authoritative websites that can link back to your business, social media and any comments, links, shares, that kind of thing going on there. You might have a blogger that talks about your business, or, you know, you might engage with an influencer, for example, that you pay to come and experience your product or service in exchange for a blog post that they're going to write. Those linked or even unlinked brand mentions are really important as well. So keep that in mind. Anything that happens off your website that links back to your site is hugely important. In terms of link building, have a think. You might say, okay, how am I going to get a link from a trusted and reputable site or a site that's relevant to my business? Like I said, there has to be that human intervention. Think about any memberships you have. Think about industry organizations that you work with. Think about cross promotion that you do. You might have a shop and stock certain products, so you might want to be listed on their website as a stockist, for example. You know, in a coaching business, you might have affiliations or accreditations with certain industry bodies. So they will have web listings that you can, or a website, sorry, where they'll have listings of accredited coaches, for example. So you might want to link there. Now, there are some other essential online business listings that are important from a search perspective, but also really impact on or part of your off-page SEO. So we'll go through these now. Business directories are really important. The top three, I would say, are the Yellow Pages, True Local, and Yelp. And it's really important that if you're listing on your business on any of these sites, that you have consistent information. So your name, address, and phone number on the best business directories is a really critical local ranking factor. So keep that in mind. So I've mentioned, obviously, you know, in terms of the number one, Google Your Business or Google My Business is the most important. So have you got a Google My Business account? That includes your Google Places, your Google Plus, and your Google Search. So make sure that that's set up. You've claimed your mapped listing and you've taken control of all details on there. The others, so your Yellow Pages, True Local, Yelp being the top three. Any other review sites that might be relevant to your business. So it could be TripAdvisor if you're in the tourism industry. It could be, you know, Yelp if you're in the hospitality industry or any other industry. So review sites are really important. Obviously, you get reviews through Facebook, you get them through Google My Business. So making sure that you're taking control of those reviews as well is also important. In terms of taking control of those, make sure you're getting alerts when a review is posted and make sure that you're online actively responding to them, positive or negative. It's equally as important. And then you've got your business directories. So I mentioned those top three. If you have a physical address, absolutely incorporate them on the listings. If you don't have a physical address, it does put you at a little bit of a disadvantage from a local SEO perspective, because local listings do play an important role in making your business more visible in local search. So obviously you need an address to appear in a local search when there's, you know, near me type searches. Keep in mind also with Australian business directories, they're not just for boosting local rankings, they can also provide referral traffic to your site. So people can actually click through. I know the comment I get the most is nobody uses Yellow Pages anymore, but if you're Googling something, particularly a small business like plumbers in Perth or, you know, whatever that might be, it is those kind of sites that come up. So being listed on there is really important, and you might find that people do click through to you as a result, or phone through to you. Just again, keep in mind the consistent name, address, and phone number. It's really important that it is the same across all platforms. Okay, so that is SEO. From an SEM perspective, which is search engine marketing, I'm not going to go into detail on that as such, because that is, it is fantastic, but it's definitely a session in its own right. So pay per click is essentially what we think about when we think about SEM, or search engine marketing. It is cost effective, it's immediate, it's flexible, and obviously you can track it. So I would highly recommend looking at some kind of pay-per-click advertising. What we are going to talk about though is remarketing. So remarketing is a form of pay-per-click advertising. SEO is ranking organically when people search, and then SEM is where you can't rank organically, or you just want to get to the top, you can set up advertising. So as I mentioned, we won't get into that, but Google AdWords has remarketing. Remarketing, if you haven't used it already, it's great for increasing brand awareness and influencing conversions, and it also is a really low cost. Now you can see by the picture on the right-hand side, and I'll explain how it works. Basically, a prospect will come to your website. Now this could be through, let's say, your social media, or it could be through a search. It could be from a brochure that you printed and have displayed. Somehow they get to your website. They are then tracked once they're on your site, and they might leave your site. Let's say they get halfway through research and then they get distracted, or they look at your product and then they compare against 5 different competitors, and by the time they've finished all that, they forget who your business name was because you were first, for example. They then will go on to other sites that they might be browsing for news or weather or whatever that might be, and your ad appears. So the idea behind that is it's brand awareness. There's a lot of impressions that happen prior to you actually paying. You only pay once they click your ad. So because they've already been to your website, they've left your site, they're then seeing your ad, the thought is that by the time they click, they're probably pretty engaged and ready to come back and transact. So they click that ad, it leads back to your website, and that's when you pay. So when I talk about being cost effective, it is really cost effective. I would highly recommend that you look at this if you haven't already. If you can't at the moment, or don't plan on having any pay-per-click advertising or any SEM as such, this should be a bare minimum of what you look at. Now, there is remarketing through Facebook advertising as well. And again, social media advertising is a session in its own right. But you can set up your Facebook pixels so that when people come to your website, they're tracked. Then when they go onto social media, you can start advertising to them on social media. So there's 2 different sort of types of remarketing, I guess. I would highly recommend that you consider both, sort of at a bare minimum, like I said, in terms of paid advertising. And then when you get to the point, you might look at further pay-per-click advertising. But that one is an absolute minimum. In terms of remarketing, you do have to have some code put on your website. It is obviously able to be done by yourself, but if you're unsure, speak to a developer or even one of our advisors about getting that code on your website. You need to start capturing, I think it's a minimum of 2,000 hits to your website that are tracked before you can actually start that advertising. So even if it's something you might be thinking, oh, I might do that in the future, absolutely look at getting it set up now so that when you're ready to, you can implement that. Okay, now social media, we touched on it a bit before in terms of social media sending signals and being really important for your SEO. And it really is. So those signals in terms of likes, comments, and shares are all really important. And that engagement, so that true engagement where you're going back and forth with the consumer, you're providing information to them, they're asking questions, you're engaging back. That kind of thing is obviously crucial. Now, social media, it has made a huge impact on all industries because consumers do like to engage with these social networking sites to research information about products and services, to make informed decisions about businesses that they might engage with. They also want to share their personal experiences. So this user-generated content is obviously seen by consumers as more credible or more authentic. So when you're looking at your social media, think about what channels are accessed by your target markets. So again, this comes back to something I said at the beginning: know who your target audience is. You don't have to be on all social media, but you absolutely have to be where your target market is. So if your target market are business people, for example, it might your focus might be LinkedIn and Facebook, and you might not be looking at other platforms at the moment. Depending on demographics, age, psychographic information that you know about your target market, that'll really dictate where and when they consume social media, so what channels they're on. You need to focus your efforts on those. Social media is snackable content, so little bits of information. We don't want extensive stories or anything like that. As I mentioned, you might have extensive stories through your blog, but you put that snackable content on your social that leads people back to your website. Thinking about remarketing that we just spoke about, let's say you do that, you've got a blog, you put a little bit of snackable content on social media that then leads people back to your website where you track them and you can advertise to them later. So it's all part of this cycle. We want to get customers in and keep them and keep communicating and engaging with them. Engagement is absolutely key. So like I said, that true and genuine engagement where you're allowing people to ask you questions or engage with your content and you're there, part of the conversation. It's absolutely crucial that you do join the conversation. One thing I do see a lot with small businesses is social media posts that are quite good. They start to get engagement, but then nobody's home and nobody's responding to questions. And you kind of get that sense that they're probably not there, you're not getting that true engagement. So you'll be a lot more successful with social if you are there to engage with people. In terms of engaging with other membership organizations, have a look at other, to build your credibility in the industry and extend your reach. Have a look at who do you have professional memberships with, because they would tend to have consumers as well. Or have some kind of consumer-facing platform. So if you can engage with them and get coverage on their socials, tag them in on different things, they might tag you. It just extends your reach. But keep in mind that social media is a visual language. So I wouldn't be posting anything without images. I would let the images do the talking. Again, going back to your target market, make sure that your images appeal to your target market. Make sure that that visual language, obviously you have to own or have authority to use the images or credit in the original photographer, but it all has to speak to your target market and be consistent with your brand. Now, again, like websites, social media, you should be considering creating mobile content first. The key thing with social media is the majority, and I don't have a statistic on it, but I would say the large majority of people use social media on a device like a mobile device, which is very much portrait. So you think of an image that appears on social, it's a portrait orientation. Whereas what we do for websites is mostly landscape. So just consider those, make sure that that portrait orientation is working. That then suits all platforms as well. So absolutely create mobile content first and have a look at how it all looks on mobile. Like I said, with social, choose those platforms that perfectly suit your target market, and don't worry about having to be on everything. Be where your customers are. That's the only place you should be, essentially. All right, so the last thing we're going to chat about today, and only touching on it again, is email marketing. Now, with email marketing, there's a range of software that you can access, and it is extremely cost effective. The key thing with email marketing is you have to be obtaining a database. Now, some businesses, they will get customers' contact details through a transaction or a number of other ways, whereas some, if it's just point to point, like small purchases, that you don't require them to give you any details, it can be a lot harder to build a database. So you have to think about how you're going to build that database. Where is the database coming from? And make sure that you've got authority to add people to a database. Now, one thing, again, a lot of small businesses do is they tend to get a database through by way of competitions and that kind of thing. I personally don't agree with that. I think that you only want people on your database that genuinely have an interest in your business and want to hear from you. If I've joined or signed up for some kind of competition, chances are I just want to win that prize. So you tend to get what I tend to see with those kind of databases is, let's say you get 5,000 people on your database, you send them that first email, you'll have a huge number of unsubscribes. Now, one of my points on the screen now is that unsubscribes can be a good thing. You don't want people that are not engaged with your brand to be following you, because they won't be opening your emails and they won't be any value to you. They're not going to be purchasing things in the future. So going back to where you get the database from, there's no point giving away something for free or spending money on a competition if they're going to be people that don't want to engage with your product or service. Now, once you've worked out how you're going to get a database, like I said, there's a number of ways. There's current customers, there's people opting in to sign up at the point of sale, you know, like even you can buy something from a retail sense at the moment and they'll ask if you want to join a rewards program, for example. That could be a way to get emails and to communicate and add value back to your customers. So think about that. Once you do have that database, make sure that you personalize any communications as much as possible. Personalization is really key. So let's say you offer 3 or 4 different products or services within your business, and I'm a customer that purchases a particular product. You probably only want to talk to me about products that I'm interested in. You might cross-promote other products, but you need to know me well enough to know what I'm going to be interested in. You also, you know, in terms of personalization, what do you know about me? Do you know my purchase behavior? Do you know my date of birth, to send me other things, whether it's birthdays or, you know, things that are relevant to the stage of life that I'm in, or my interests. So as much information and as much segmentation you can do in your database, the better. Don't always promote yourself. Email marketing, I'm sure everybody's inboxes are inundated with sales promotions and that kind of thing. I would provide something back to customers. It could be information, tips, hints, other useful content for your audience. And then there might be, you know, something to get them across to your website as well, or an offer or something at the end. But if it's all about you, people are going to lose interest. It has to add value back to them as well to be read. Now, in terms of being read, just that last point there, the from name, so who the email actually comes from, being relevant to the business or how the person signed up, and the subject line are the 2 most important factors with email marketing to make sure that those emails get opened. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally look at my inbox pretty much every morning, and you've got the, you know, however many emails from businesses trying to sell you something overnight, and I go through, I do not read every single one of them. I'll delete based on who they're from and obviously that subject line. Whereas if it's something that appeals to me and is relevant to me, I'll open it. So that's kind of the gatekeeper right there. So yeah, that's essentially it in terms of email marketing. It is very cheap and cost effective, or yeah, can be cheap or cost effective depending on how you do it. Just make sure that it's done professionally, legally, ethically. Obviously, you need to make sure that people have the ability to unsubscribe. You're not breaching any privacy laws or anything like that. And give them something back, add value to their inbox, not taking away from it. All right, so that's it from me. That's an absolute whiz through on the basics of digital marketing. Everything that happens in a digital sense can be measured, so make sure that you are tracking all results within your own monthly reporting to make sure that you're on tracking, comparing your efforts month on month or week on week, however often you might like to do that. If you do want to know any more, please book a one-on-one session. You can do that through your ASBAS login or possibly only by phone at the moment because we're in a transitional phase with this particular program. The new program is still due to launch soon, so you might be already aware of that, but keep out for an eye out, for communications from Business Station. If you have any questions, I'm going to stay on now, so please fire away and ask them. But otherwise, I hope to speak to you soon, and I wish you the best of luck with your digital marketing. Okay, guys, it doesn't seem to be any questions. Thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.